Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom. I am looking forward to Shabbat, and I would have played that rather than hurt your ears, but I don't own the copyrights to that. Oh gosh, guys, it was a wonderful time out with the Sighted Moon group, which would be this year would be as normal, Joe and Randy. Um, had a great time. Yeah, Joe and I are very vocal about the fact that we don't end up exactly on the same page. We have a lot of things that are extremely similar. In fact, in some places, we come to the same point. And predominantly, it leads us to the same timing on the biblical calendar. But this year, those differences has created a fork in the road. And Joe and I had a lively time discussing the finer points of the biblical calendar and all things biblical. Um, in fact, this is Friday, got home yesterday. Wednesday night, my final evening with them, we went out to dinner and we started at dinner discussing. And the waitress came and said, I'm closing the kitchen. Do you need anything? We said, no, we're great. Can we stay? She says, oh, yeah, sure. No, I just want to know. And so then she said, I'm closing the coffee bar. Do you want a coffee? We said, no, we're fine. And finally she says, I'm closing the bar. I said, okay, we'll go. So Joe and I can be pretty intense when we talk about scripture. And again, there's a lot we see the same, but there's just enough this year that it's put us on two different paths. Um, and so I wanted to bring you from my perspective where we're at. And if you want to see photos, I would suggest you go to Sighted Moon YouTube channel. I didn't double dip on the photos. I mean, I was with Joe and Randy. I know what they were taking. I was there when they were taking it, and I don't have a bone to pick with what they're going to show you. They didn't grab it off some Instagram site, or some social media platform. Those are their photos, and I was with them as well. So I was with them for most every place they inspected. I was not with them the first day, but I was reading some literature about barley inspections from history, the past. I mean, way back. And I saw some areas where people were inspecting that an early Omer was usually determined in those areas. And I had never been to one of these exact locations. So I said, hey, why don't you go over there? And in this area, they did find I'll call it cohesive. What I mean by cohesive, I mean a closely grouped area of barley that was in the same general condition. Of it be barley, but there wasn't an Omer. That's what they told me, and I trust what they say because they speak the truth. But it's just that our criteria is slightly different. So that was a harvestable quantity that was not an Omer quantity. For me, again, harvestable means a section that I can take pretty much a cohesive group of barley that's at the same level of maturity within well, let's just say soft dough to hard dough within that range, or medium dough depending on the timing, or medium dough to just as it enters soft dough. In other words, I don't want a lot of blooming barley, which this year we have 3 levels. I don't want a lot of blooming barley. Mixed with soft dough mixed with a harder dough. For me, that's not cohesive. For me, that represents 3 levels of barley coming out of the earth. And indeed, we've had that. We've had some areas with 2, I'll call them flushes, and some areas with 3 flushes. So Ramla, it was a cohesive presentation, and you could have put the sickle to it and taken an Omer. without a lot of waste. What I saw with them in the south and in northern Negev was sections of barley that were between 4 to 6 Abib barley heads in 10. So of every 10 barley you would gather, there's about 4 to 6 that would be ready. And for me, that's not sufficient at all. I've already told you what I'm looking for. The other thing we did is we stopped by and we checked on the flax. The flax is just at the beginning of blooming, just at the beginning, which means because it compares with the barley is like we're seeing just at the beginning of being able to achieve some of those dough stages that we look for to harvest. And the final thought on looking at a section of barley that is not uniformly ripened is when you look back at Exodus 9, 31 and 32, you can see that not only was the barley of Aviv, but the flax was blooming. So when the hail hit that, there was enough damage that it meant something. For me, if we're taking an area of barley where only 4 to 6 of them are of Aviv and the hail had hit that, then I don't think it would have been recorded as such a significant loss. We could not get into a lot of places in the northern Negev. Since I had been there, they have created roadblocks with actual police cars and military backup behind the police cars and the police officers to keep people from going into some of these areas. For example, like Barry, we could not get into Barry. We were in the area. Of course, basically any of those places that were attacked during October 7th, and even some extenuating greater areas that we couldn't get into. They were non-accessible. So I was not able to take them to the places that I had seen earlier, with one exception. And that exception in that location was about 5 and 10, possibly 6, but without going through and doing a test, which my calendar is determined, my criteria is set. I was just with them, so I didn't go in and gather and make a test. But my estimation, if I said 5 and 10, I'd be comfortable. If I said 6 and 10, I'd say I'd have to count. So, and further on that whole counting thing, when you gathered your omers, you would have put them in a basket and taken them to the temple, and the priests were commanded to roast it before they made the meat offering, because you wanted to kill the yeast that's on the outside of the grain. So in order to take a qualifying omer then from your field, you would have been required to sort what was in that basket. Now, I'm not talking about scriptural. I'm not. I'm talking to you like a farmer from that land. Am I going to take to Elohim something that is not a omer from my field? What if I took a quantity and it was sorted and the omer was short? Now, I would say that the farmers would have been pretty good at guessing that. And I will also say that how many plants make a omer of barley will vary from year to year. In 2017, we were in an all-time, more than a 50-year drought, and the Kinneret was at an all-time low level in the lake. It was deficient in water by a great amount. And that year, I remember very specifically the omer, the barley that ripened, was a little thin, flat grain. I mean, it had as Deuteronomy 32, it talks about fat kidneys of wheat. There was no fat on that grain. Okay, there was no plumpness to it. It made very little flour, but it did make flour. That was the first year that I actually ground the barley and made one barley cake for myself in the house. Um, this year, it would take a lot less because we've had a lot of rain, but it's also slowed down the ripening of the barley. So you can't just say, oh, we'll collect this much barley and this will make our Omer. And you can't do that, especially if you're not harvesting uh, only barley that is cohesively Abib. If you're not doing that, then you're sorting stalks and heads of barley because you want to make sure you've got your right Omer quantity when you go down there. And the other thing is, besides satisfying the law, we have to feed people, had to be fed from this. It was a curse if you didn't have enough food, enough sustenance for your family, and you ended up selling yourself into slavery. You know, you could not be redeemed until Shemitah. You sold your land, you sold yourself to feed your family, and that could not be redeemed until Shemitah. So I'm very, very, very slow to jump the gun on calling an Omer. Um, I am looking also at the 7 species, and the wheat is short grass, even in the north, very short grass. Um, as I said, the flax is just beginning to bud. I mean, we're right on the cusp of it. This week it'll really come out. You'll see it everywhere. But my criteria is that I'm not claiming, I'm not looking, I'm not pursuing, I'm not waiting for an Omer to develop at this point of the month. Um, and I'm also looking at, I know that I need grapes by the 9th of Av, as the sages say. It's really the 5th day in the 9th month. I know that I need pomegranates on Yom Teruah. So all of these factors I'm looking at in addition to the barley and that calculation of not letting the first fruit drop. Now, another thing that Joe and I had a lot of deep conversations about is he believes that the Omer of first fruits is the harvest. I don't. I see them as two very separate things. I see that the Omer quantity that is harvested, okay, I'm describing an action. The Omer barley, the reason I'm doing it this way is because when you look at the word kites and kitzer, that's the word that the King James uses for summer, but it really means harvest, harvester, harvesting. So when it says summer kites, that's the word for harvest, for summer, or the harvest time. And when you see harvester or harvesting, okay. So I see the Omer as never having belonged to us. I know that we have to have what I will call a national Omer to take to the temple for Wave Sheaf Day to begin the harvest. Um, Joe believes that the first Omer of the entire land can't even be touched uh, as far as being cut into Wave Sheaf Day. Totally in disagreement with that from the scriptures that I have studied. What I see is that there is a Omer harvest or Omer harvesting that never belonged to us. It was never ours. It was never meant to be given to us. It was something that's always belonged to him ahead of time. If you want to say it like this, we were tenant farmers on the land. He was the landowner. We were tenant farmers. We owed him from our crop for allowing us to use his land and for providing the seed and the water that gave us the crop. Okay, so that was never, 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 never belonging to us, ever, ever, ever. And so giving it to the owner before we take our harvest, the balance, could not happen. Our balance could not be taken until wave sheaf day. Because what are you doing with that wave sheaf? You're waving it in the temple, you're waving it to the Father. A lot more I could say about that, but I'm not going to. I'll leave it there. So Joe doesn't see it that way. I have a lot of problems when I'm thinking critically with logistics of what if you get to wave sheaf day? Well, like this year, they're determining what they determined from the northern Negev. And you know, on foot, rough journey. On donkey, rough journey. And what if you get sick along the way? Or what if, God forbid, something happens like the Good Samaritan where somebody knocks you off your donkey and you don't get to the temple in time? Yes, you're trusting in God. I get all that. But you also don't set yourself up to fail before you ever get started. So, have I covered all that? So basically, you don't even touch the first fruits of the land until wave sheaf day. And you take the wave sheaf and you put it in a basket and you get it to the temple and you get it out of your hands, or you're going to end up being like Abel and you're going to end up hanging onto it too long. And a lot of people have this problem that something that they're taking care of suddenly becomes theirs, and then it doesn't get to the location it's going to. And it would behoove us to get that out of our hands, get it in that basket, get it carried to the temple, come home, do not touch your crop until wave sheaf day, when the general gathering harvest to you could begin on the land. Before that, the only thing that I believe can be collected is those Omer quantities from the fields, because the first fruits belong to him. We're the tenant farmers. He's the landowner. We owe him dues. Okay. We had a lot of fun. Looking forward to next year. We did a lot of fun parodies out there. You know, it's time for those people who want to start the annual Body Barley Wars. It's time for them to lose their teeth. Uh, Joe and I will never quit this process of having parodies. You can have a strong opinion and you can do like I'm doing. You can say what I'm saying, but to call people names and be vulgar and to try to destroy your reputation, or to try to confuse the person that's seeking the truth by sharing things that causes a new person coming to the calendar to trip and stumble, is wicked and evil. Just is, and I'm done with it. And Joe and I will continue to go out every year. We're going to continue to do these parodies. We're going to continue to help you understand the absolute fleshy, ridiculous human spirit that's behind these body wars. Doesn't matter who's poking or who's criticizing or who's tearing down the individual by their negative comments. It needs to stop. It needs to stop. All right, guys, I'm going to get on with my Shabbat, and I'm going to totally enjoy being in the house today. I'm a little bit numb in the brain from all the sword sharpening Joe and I have been doing. Poor Randy, we ran him out of the restaurant. He was out on the beach as we carried him on. Anyway, guys, have a good Shabbat. I am going to try to go back out to that area that I reported from. If I can get in there, I have a plan. I'm not going to tell anybody my plan or when my plan is, but I think I can get back in there legally. And I want to do that in the coming week and see if I can look and see where that barley is. Because for me, myself, I am very interested in the timing of when I see me an acceptable omer of barley happening. I mean, it's already too late for my cutoff, but I still want to follow it through and I still want to see what it's going to do. Shabbat shalom, guys.